Hello and welcome to Simple OT. Today I will be reviewing developmental assessments and ways in which to differentiate them from one another because, wow, there are a lot. So to kick us off, in the upper left-hand corner, we have NICU or outpatient developmental assessments specifically for preemies and newborns. So first we have the assessment of preterm infant behavior and the neurological assessment of preterm and full-term newborn infants. Both of these, in my opinion, are pretty easy to understand what they are for and what populations they serve because they say preterm and newborn infant in the actual name. So if this pops up on a question, just reason through why it might be called what it's called, right? So moving on to the Denver Developmental Screening Test. This is for 1 month to 6 year old. The Denver test, it ultimately screens for early diagnosis of developmental delays in areas of personal, social, fine motor, adaptive, language, and gross motor. All of these areas, to me, could fit into the activity or occupation of making a Denver omelet, all the way from going to the grocery store and walking the groceries up your stairs to your kitchen to actually cracking the eggs and doing the whisking, eating perhaps with friends, and sharing the meal in good conversation. So when you think of this test, think of making a Denver omelet and all the developmental skills that go into creating a Denver omelet. And it's important to note that the test is terminated after the third fail. So to me, if it took me more than 3 times to make something, I just would give up. So it's also standardized. Anytime you see a red S, that's going to mean it's a standardized assessment. Moving on to the Bailey Scales of Infant Development. This is for infants, so from 1 to 42 months is considered an infant here. It is a performance-based assessment that includes a parent questionnaire, and there's 5 domains that are going to be assessed. The main takeaway here is Bailey infant. That's what I think of when I think of Bailey. There's also the first step screening test, and this is used to screen preschool-age children in tabletop activities. Jumping over to the center column, we have the Hawaii Early Learning Profile, or the HELP. This one's really interesting because there's actually an assessment for birth to 3 years with patients with developmental delays or patients that are at risk for delays or disability. And then there's also one for 3 to 6 years old with or without a delay. And it's non-standardized. And a key point is that it measures function in natural environments. So here I have drawn a little doodle of a Hawaiian island with palm trees and an ocean. So when you think of the Hawaii Early Learning Profile or the HELP, think about how beautiful the natural environment is in Hawaii and think about being assessed inside of Hawaii. There also is 6 different areas that are included in this assessment, and most notably self-help. That one stood out to me because it was different from the previous assessments. Moving on to the standardized test of the Miller Assessment for Preschoolers, or the MAP. It is for 3 to 5 year olds, and it reviews sensory and motor functioning in preschoolers specifically. The PEDI, or the Pediatric Evaluation of Disability Inventory, is used for 6 months to 7.5 years. It's also standardized, and it is a behavioral checklist, and there is a rating scale involved. There's also a little bit of observation with this assessment as well. Jumping up to the top right hand corner, we have our motor assessments, which are most famously the BOT and the Peabody or the PDMS. So the BOT is good for 4 to 21-year-olds, and it assesses motor proficiency, while the Peabody or the PDMS is good for patients ranging from birth to 6 years old. So to me, if I have a question on the exam, or if I am interacting with a patient and they have some possible motor delays, I'm probably going to do the BOT or the Peabody. And if you think about it, if they're under 4, I'm definitely going to be doing the Peabody, right? Because the Peabody is birth and up, and then the BOT is only from 4 to 21. So the Peabody looks at motor proficiency as well as motor development, but also reflexes, and there's a visual motor integration piece as well. There's also grasping, but I think of that as a part of motor skills. There's also the time assessment, which is from birth to 3.5 years old, and it assesses movement quality, and there's 5 different tests here. For vision assessments, you have the BERI or the BMI, which is good for patients ranging from 2 to 100. It looks at visual motor skills, and there's 3 different tests or packets that you would administer. There's also the developmental test of visual perception. There is one for 4 to 10-year-olds, which is the DTVP2, and then there's actually another one for 11 to 74-year-olds, which is the DTVPA. And then you have the motor free visual perception test. So the MVPT3 is good for patients ages 4 to 95, and it is able to assess vision without any motor components. Moving on to psych assessments, there is a childhood autism rating scale. This is called CARS, and it is good for children older than 2 with an autism diagnosis to determine the severity of autism. This may or may not be considered outdated depending on your workplace, but I included it in here because it's definitely something to study. There's also the coping inventory and early coping coping inventory. So the coping inventory is for 15 years and older, and then the early coping inventory is for 4 months to 3 years. These assessments determine effectiveness of behavior and coping styles within the self, and then also coping within the environment.